Good morning, students. Today we are going to continue with the obstetric emergencies. Already we have covered about ruptured uterus. We've covered antepartum hemorrhage. And today I want to deal with cord issues when they present like obstetric emergencies. And basically, we have three types of cord issues. Number one, it is cord presentation. We have cord prolapse and we have cord Hochland. So, as a student, when the term cord presentation comes into your mind, what do you think about it? And by definition, we are trying to say this is when a loop of umbilical cord slips over in front of the presenting part that is actually on the lower uterine segment and the membranes are still intact. That is when you talk about a cord presentation. When the cord is just filled in the vaginal and the membranes are fractured is known as the cord prolapse. Or we can, in simple terms, we can define cord prolapse as when the loop of the umbilical cord slips over the presenting part and the membranes have ruptured. That is when the term cord prolapse is used. So it is very difficult for sometimes students when they are asked in an examination to differentiate between cord presentation and cord prolapse. They try to beat in the bush. By the definition, what I've said is the cord presentations, the status of the membranes are intact. While in the cord prolapse, the membranes have ruptured. Then during the normal process, during labor, we ask ourselves, when the membranes are intact, how do they start in actual process of forming? They start forming, the membranes are always flat, they start forming, then they start bulging. When they bulge to an extent in that the amniotic sac cannot hold that amniotic fluid, that is when they rupture. And then we ask ourselves, how do membranes rupture? Membranes can rupture in two ways. Number one, you as a midwife, you can rupture the membranes through artificially. You can rupture them artificially, or they can rupture spontaneously. Now that is when you can be able to say they can be. We talk about the cord prolapse. Then we ask ourselves, what are the predisposing factors? Predisposing factors are to either cord prolapse or the cord presentation. Number one is what we call high or ill-fitting presenting part. The presenting part is not well applied into the pelvic brim, so membranes they tend to rupture. The other one is high parity. In high parity, we are saying cord slips before the proper engagement. Then we also have prematurity. In prematurity, we are trying to ask ourselves, this one is in regard to the fetal head. Therefore, this means the fetal head is too small and it is not well fitting into the maternal pelvic brim. Then we still have things like malpresentation. In malpresentation, we are trying to address the ill-fitting nature of the presenting part. And this one can basically occur in some cases where we have a shoulder presentation or in terms of bridge presentation. Because in shoulder presentation, we are trying to say the presenting diameter is the basocromial diameter of the fetus, which is actually 12 centimeters. Now in bridge presentation, we are trying to talk about vitrocandelic diameter, which is actually around 10 centimeters. So therefore, this means in shoulder, it is the dorsum, which is the denominator, being applied into the lower uterine segment, or it becomes the presenting part. Now in bridge, we are saying the buttocks, the sacrum, is now at the lower pole of the maternal uterus. The other predisposing factor, we can talk something like multiple pregnancy, likely in malpresentation, in most cases where we have the second twin presenting in this one. We also have polyhydramnios, and we are saying, what is polyhydramnios? Here we need to understand about the normal amniotic fluid. So that when we talk about 1,000 ml or 1 liter. That is the normal amniotic fluid. And we know the functions of the amniotic fluid. Now, when you say polyhydramnios is a predisposing factor to cord prolapse or cord presentation, what are you trying to talk about it? And how do we define polyhydramnios? Basically, it's a excessive amount of amniotic fluid in the uterine cavity, around to 1500 mLs. And we are saying in polyhydramnios, the cord is swept down by a gush of the amniotic fluid. This one can be able to cause that one. Then the other thing that I need to you as a student to note is about when you are doing artificial rupture of the membranes, which is actually again a practice that majority all the current midwives they are trying to do. Even before the cervix is fully dilated, they try to rupture themselves with amniotic hook. But we ask ourselves, if this practice is being done, are we able to practice the control of the amniotic fluid when we are releasing when the liquor hamni being released? Because now, if you don't control that amniotic fluid following rupture of the artificial rupture of the membranes, the cord can easily slip over the presenting part, and that is what you'll be able to practice good controlling when that amniotic fluid is just actually being released from the amniotic sac. Therefore, I need to discuss again about diagnosis. We ask ourselves, how do you diagnose cord prolapse? Number one, the cord is felt during vaginal examination in front of the presenting part. And this one we are trying to say the membranes are ruptured, basically now in the cord presentation. Then again, we are saying if this fetus is alive and you've actually touched the cord, you can feel the cord pulsating. The cord is actually pulsating because the fetus is alive. But if the fetus is not alive, this means that the pulsation of the fetus, again, you cannot be felt. Then again, we are saying if compressed by the presenting part, if it's compressed by the presenting part, there may be fetal heart rate deceleration. That is actually when you're talking about bradycardia. The fetal heart rate tries to decrease from the normal. In management, how do we manage this cord presentation? Number one, we are saying do not rupture the membranes. Do not. And stop vaginal examination to reduce the risk of rupturing the membranes. You can shout for the help. Continue monitoring the fetal heart rate. Then the position the mother in positions that can reduce the chances of cord compression, like knee chest compression, like Trendelenburg's, etc., or exaggerated seams position. Then you prepare mother for emergency cesarean section. That is basically about on the cord presentation. When you go back to the cord prolapse, I talked about the divination and I said this is when the cord lies in front of the presenting part and the membrane have ruptured. And again, we are saying diagnosis is actually through the vaginal examination. That is after the rupture of the membranes. Or perhaps you can be able to feel the cord on the vagina. You can also see the cord, the umbilical cord on the vulva. Then again, when you auscultate, the fetal heart rate is the same like that of the fetal presentation. There is a deceleration of the fetal heart rate. And in management of this one, we are saying, number one, shout for a help. Call for a help. And don't you shout for the help. Just say, cord prolapse. Then you need what? Assistance from the medical aid to come inside.